When it comes to cleaning, my parents used to drive me crazy. And why is that? It's because they did not really have like a weekly cleaning routine. The cleaning was basically on as needed basis. So whenever we see that something needs to be done, that's when it gets done. And nothing was really done regularly on a weekly basis, for example, or after some particular event or something. And that used to drive me crazy because when the time actually comes to clean the thing, sometimes it gets really out of control and it's much harder to clean it than if you actually just kept up with it in between. So when I moved out and when I started living with my now husband, we developed our weekly cleaning routine and also other like monthly and spring cleaning routines. But today's topic is the weekly cleaning routine, which we do more or less every single weekend. And today I want to tell you about how I developed it, how I decided which things should be done. Now, I did not really necessarily just walk around my apartment and decide this. It was actually over time gradually changing and adding things that I feel like make a difference in one way or another, and we will talk about that today. One more note, I took advantage of filming this video when my husband was out of the house because it was easier for me to film, but most of the time we actually split the chores, and I will tell you how we do that and who does usually each thing, but just keep in mind that I am filming myself doing all of this because it was just easier to film it that way. So why is a weekly cleaning routine such an important thing to me, and why do I think it's useful? Well, like I mentioned, it's mostly because if you keep up with things and if you clean them regularly, then it's not as hard to do it as if you left them uncleaned for weeks and weeks or months and then you try to do it. Now, of course, some things are meant to be cleaned like that, not every week, but every once in a while, and that's completely fine. So actually this video is about exactly that, deciding which things make sense to clean on a weekly basis and which things just don't, and how I build that routine, how I decide what to do, and why particularly this thing is important to me. And I must say, we try to do these things every weekend, but it does happen sometimes that we cannot, because for example, if we have guests over, then we usually just do it after the guests leave, either next weekend or different chores the next couple of days. Some things we do still even when the guests are here, but it really depends on what we are doing and how long they're staying and many other things, so that's not really part of the routine. But I did want something like a list of things that I can do to help bring my space to some baseline that feels clean and nice, but it's not really that detailed. It's just basic things that really make a difference in my opinion. And some of these things we definitely do throughout the week as well, for example, taking out the trash. So we definitely do that throughout the week at least once more, maybe even twice depending on what we are doing. Right now I am using a Todoist app to make a list of things that I do every week, but before that I also used my bullet journal and just random paper whenever I needed that, and I even tried to just remember everything I need to do, but this is the one that works for me right now. I think that's the best one for me right now, so that's what we're gonna take a look today. And as you can see, I have things separated into rooms, and I also have things that are just not based on a room but just activity, such as vacuuming, because that's what we do like for the whole entire apartment. So we just like vacuum the entire apartment at once, but then we clean each room separately for different things that need to be done in each room. Also on the list we have some stuff that are, hey, you need to do this on the weekend, and then we also have some stuff that are like, check if this thing needs to be done, and then either do it or just schedule next time you need to do it. One of those things is like refilling certain stuff, for example soap. I'm just checking if I need to refill the soap. If it doesn't need to be refilled, then that's completely fine. I'm not gonna refill a little bit each time. It's just to check if it's almost at the bottom and it needs to be refilled. So keep that in mind when we are talking about this, but I will probably mention that again and again throughout the video. So without further ado, let's talk about how I built my weekly cleaning routine and what I do as my weekly cleaning reset. So one of the first things that I was responsible or to kind of participate in cleaning myself, it was my own laundry. So I did not wash it or set it to wash, but maybe I would just fold it and put it away, and that's how it all started. And that's one of the first things I still do in my weekly routine. Nowadays we have 3 different types of laundry that we do. One is our own clothes, one is the sheets of the bed, and then one is towels and everything related like that. Now for example, for sheets we don't necessarily need to wash it that specific day. Sometimes we wash it throughout the week, but since we gotten this new machine, even though it's like not a super expensive machine, it's one of the cheaper ones, it has this ability to schedule when the program will be finished, and you can set it for a couple of hours in advance. So for example, what we do is we take the sheets and put them in the washing machine the night before and set it to be done washing in the morning the next day. So usually that's exactly what we do. We set it on Friday evening to be done on Saturday morning, and sometimes we even do it throughout the week if we have the time. Sometimes we even set it to wash in the morning so that it's done by the time we come back from work. But if we don't do that, at the very least we're doing it from Friday to Saturday morning. And one more reason why I love doing it this way in particular is that because when I wake up the next morning, we have like this one thing that it's simple and easy to do, which is basically just take the sheets out and put them in the dryer. It takes maybe 5 minutes at most, and it's just an easy first task to say, okay, we're now starting the cleaning process. So when we do wake up the next morning and when we are moving the sheets from the washer to the dryer, sometimes we also set the next thing to wash. Usually it's our clothes that we wore throughout the week, and I like doing that because I always have clean and nice clothes that I will wear the next week for my work, and those clothes are usually part of my like work capsule wardrobe, so it is very important to me that they are clean and ready to be worn on Monday the next week. That's exactly what I did in this case as well. On Friday evening I set the sheets to be done in the morning, and then in the morning I put that to the dryer and I set the next thing, which is our clothes, to be washed. Okay, so we're done with that one. Easy thing. We're not doing the actual washing, the machine is doing that, we just set it to wash. It's super easy to do. What next? Usually what we start with next is just throwing out all the trash, and by that I don't mean actually taking it out every time. Usually what I mean is go around the house and any garbage you see, throw it in the nearest trash can. And you will say, okay, I do this regularly, I don't have any trash. It can be true, even for me most of the time, but then you have some times where something fell on the floor and you didn't see it. It can be you were sick and you have a bunch of tissue paper next to your bed just because you sneezed a lot, and that happens to me all the time as well. Also, for example, my husband likes to leave candy wrappers sometimes near the couch. So this is just like sweep the whole house, see if there is trash and throw it away. Why we are doing this as basically the first thing actually cleaning something is because it's an easy thing to do. We don't really need to think about it too much. It's just trash, we're throwing it away, and we're making space to actually be able to clean or to move other stuff and see other stuff that needs to be taken care of. That's exactly what I did this time as well. Usually, like I said, those are like candy wrappers and tissue paper and stuff like that. That's not really like wrappers and packaging for whatever reason. It can be like one or two things, but it's important that we clean them and especially move them away from the floor because we are gonna be doing vacuuming, so this is important to throw away first. In my case, that's exactly what I did do, but in this case I also had to actually take out the trash and throw it away because it was overflowing and it needed to be done, so I did that one as well. So in this case we're still kind of preparing our space to be clean. We're barely doing actually any cleaning, we're just like moving stuff away so that we can do the cleaning, but we are now moving to the actual cleaning, which I started with the kitchen. Usually my husband is the one that actually does the kitchen, but this time it was me because I was the only one home, and we basically just have some sort of standards that we want to see, what do we want to have in the end of that cleaning. So looking at the kitchen, what do you think is important to you, or in this case to me, to have clean and just to upkeep with these things to be able to use it and enjoy it? In my case, one of the easiest things to do is if there is anything in the dishwasher that's clean, put it away. That's usually what I do because I like doing that part. And then all the dirty dishes actually need to go in the dishwasher. And sometimes there are dishes that cannot be put in the dishwasher, so that need to be washed by hand. And I like that this is done as well, but I don't like to do it. So usually my husband is the one that deals with the dirty dishes. I just don't like it. Next thing I put on the list is to put anything that's not in its place to its place, because that just again makes the space clean and just resets it back to where it belongs, and it gives you again the clean slate to actually clean, for example, the sink and the counters, which I also think is quite important to clean every once in a while. If you don't do it every single day, that's in my opinion completely fine depending on how much you use it, but once a week at least it's quite important to do. Then we also have to clean the sink actually, and in this case what I was thinking about is let's just make sure there's no stains. Let's spray it because of possible lime scale buildup, so we don't want that, and just to make sure that that doesn't happen and that we are keeping like the longevity of it, we should spray it with something that kind of helps get rid of it. There are many different things that can be done here. I don't have anything in particular that I absolutely love. You can use whatever doesn't bother you, I guess, and just spray it all over, let it sit for a while, wipe it down, and you know that you did something to clean it and to keep up with it. Once all the dishes are washed and the sink is empty, that's when you can do this. Last but not least, once everything is in its place, everything that's trash is thrown away, everything is put away to its place. Now we can just wipe the surfaces, which means usually the counters, and we are done with the kitchen. In the end of this, we basically have clean, nice kitchen and everything is back on its place. And if you're doing any of this and you notice something that needs to be done and you feel like you have the time and the energy to do it that day, you can totally do it. Sometimes we do notice that, for example, the stove is a bit dirtier than usual, and then we can do it as part of this reset if we have the time and the energy. Sometimes we are doing this and we know this and we don't have the time or the energy, and in that case it's completely fine to just schedule it for whenever you think you will have the time next. So maybe next weekend, for example, or even in a couple of days. Next room we're gonna be talking about is the living room. In our case they are connected, so it's basically one huge room, but in this case I mean the living area, so to speak. So it's basically where we have the TV and the couch, and I put just two things as a weekly reset here. One of them is wipe the dust, and the second thing is to clear out the coffee table. Now we don't actually have coffee tables, or I should say we have these two like IKEA tables where you can sit and eat at the TV, which can be turned into coffee tables, but we just keep them the first way, let's be honest. And we actually like them more because they can go under the table, and even if you're just using them as a coffee table, they're easier to just be able to completely relax and put stuff on it. And they don't actually get as cluttered because they're two smaller tables compared to the bigger actual coffee table that we used to have back home before we moved here. But that's one of the things that's kind of important to me, to declutter as much as we can the space that we have, as much as we have the energy to do, to just kind of remove things that don't belong there and clear the space so that we can actually wipe it down, and then in the end leave it in a better state than it was. And of course wiping out the dust is also super important to me because I think it makes quite a bit of difference in how you feel when you see and enter that part of the house. I don't know, it's just kind of easy thing that you can do, and it feels like there is something different about the space, so I think it's quite worth it to do that. Speaking of dusting, one more thing I usually really like to dust and clean in this way is actually our bed frame and side tables to the bed. So yeah, we are moving now to the bedroom and doing the same thing, basically just wiping down the dust. It's usually not that much, but if you leave it for longer, for example if you're sick and you cannot clean 1 week and you leave it for 2 weeks, you will see quite a bit of difference, in my opinion at least, especially because we have white furniture, so I think it's quite visible. Maybe in your case it's not as much, but I really like that feeling when everything is like dust free and looks nice. So we're doing the same thing there. We're wiping down the bed frame. If your bed frame is not wooden, then maybe you have to do something else to it, I don't know, but in our case that's what I do. And also the side tables, same reason, same thing, because my computer and my setup is also in this room. I do that one as well, but sometimes I actually deal with this throughout the week or before that or after that. But if I did not, then this is the day where I should include it as part of my reset. Next thing we are tackling is the bathroom, and this one has quite a bit of things that can be done in it, and also you don't really have to overdo it either. So we need to find this balance where it's something that's visible and feels really nice, but it's not also over the top. And in my case, what I decided to do here is first clean the sinks. In a similar way, what we're doing in the kitchen is basically remove all the stuff that's sitting on the sink, spray down with something that removes lime scale or just helps clear that buildup up, let it sit for a minute or two, and then wipe it down and just clear it out. What I usually like to do is take the towel that we were using for hands near that sink and just wipe down a little bit here and there, especially the chrome parts of it, because it looks really nice when you completely clean it like that. It looks really shiny, and then those towels go to the laundry. Super easy and simple, and yet it helps really reset the space, because sometimes in the sink you have like a little bit of toothpaste, it can have a little bit of lime scale buildup, you can have a little bit of hair here and there for many reasons. So I think it's really nice to see it like squeaky clean at least once a week. Next thing is the shower, and this is one of those things where you get to decide what you want to do with it. Actually, you can just do the same thing as the sinks, which is what I usually do, but if I just notice that it's a little bit more dirty than usual, or maybe I didn't do a little bit of deeper cleaning of it in a bit, then I can do a little bit more if I feel like it, or if I'm not in a hurry and I'm feeling motivated and energetic, then I can do a little bit more. But usually the bare minimum is to do the same thing as the sink, so just spray it down, let it sit, wash it down, and then just use one of the towels to wipe it clean. But if I feel motivated and I feel like it needs to be done, sometimes I clean the drain a bit. It just feels nicer to know that this part is also cleaned more or less regularly. For example, let's say every 2-3 weeks, depending on if we're having guests or whatever else. I usually do try to clean this part every time we have guests coming over or when they actually leave. And then if I feel like it really needs like like a deep clean, in that case I can also actually clean the glass and everything else. But the bare minimum part of the weekly clean is just to do the same thing as the sink and just spray down, let it sit, and then just wipe it down. Now I count this as part of the bathroom, but technically right now we have separated bathroom and toilet. And the next thing is cleaning the actual toilet. I feel like this also makes quite a bit of difference, cleaning more or less weekly. We do two things here mostly. We put some kind of chemical to clean the inside of the toilet, let it sit for a bit and then clean it out. And the second part is to use some kind of toilet wipe to wipe the toilet seat. And I feel like this makes a big difference because it feels much cleaner and it feels like there's something done to it. And doing it almost every single week, I feel like really keeps the toilet in a good state, not letting it have some sort of buildup and just becoming gross. Sometimes it does happen that, for example, we are sick and then we are not cleaning for, let's say, 2 weeks, even maybe more sometimes. And you can actually see after some time that it starts to get a bit gross. And I want to prevent this as much as I can, so this is what we usually do to kind of help with that. We have one more thing to do here, and that is refill all the soaps and shampoos. And I have everything in these small IKEA balls, whatever you want to call them, pumps. And we have quite a bit of them at each sink and in the shower for my hair products. And again, this is one of those things where I just take a look, and if it needs to be done, then I do it. If, for example, my shampoo is very low, I will refill it. Or if the soap is really low, I will refill it. But if it's, for example, about half, then I will not. One exception to this is when we are having guests over. Usually in those cases, I make sure that the soaps are completely full, just because it goes really quickly depending on how many guests you have. But other than that, I just refill it if it needs to be done. But it was important to me to have this on the list to remind me to take a look at these things and see if it needs to be done. And just like refilling the soaps, I also like to go to other rooms and see if anything else needs to be refilled. For example, in the kitchen, maybe some spices needs to be topped up depending on how much is left already in the spice jars. And in this particular case, for this weekend, I have this jar with wash pods for the laundry, and that was empty that morning, so I decided to refill it. Usually we buy this exactly a little bit in advance so that we have it on hand when it needs to be refilled, and usually just dump it back into the jar. I personally prefer the jar because then you can buy like these huge boxes of refillable things that cost less, but they are not really great for actual usage. They take a bit of space and they're just not easy to just grab one and be done with it. And the jar is actually in that case much better in my case because it has like a big opening. You can easily just grab one and that's it. Other than this, I also had to refill one more thing in the kitchen, but usually it's just like that, 1 or 2 things that need to be refilled, and sometimes nothing. But again, it's important to me that I have it on the list to remind me to take a look at this thing and see if it needs to be done. I'm usually the one who does the bathroom while my husband does the kitchen, and then we do other things more or less, whoever has more time and more energy. But I will say my husband is the one who usually does the vacuuming, which is the next thing I did in this case. Basically what we do is go through the entire apartment. If there is something on the floor, put it somewhere up so it's easier to have the space to actually vacuum, and then just go through the apartment and vacuum everything. In the bathroom, it's important to take the towel that's on the floor and just make sure that everything that was on it is on the floor and being vacuumed as well. But other than that, is just going through the entire apartment and just vacuuming as usual. Right after that is also mopping or going with this like sweeper, whatever. And with this, I have to be honest, we don't do it that often. We do it sometimes, not every week, because I don't really know if it's that important, if it makes that much of a difference. I feel like it does, but not that much. We are taking our shoes off every time inside. We have like house shoes, or we're just going barefoot. So usually the floors are not that dirty. So we do this sometimes, but not necessarily every week. And when it comes to vacuuming, we of course sometimes also vacuum during the week, but for me it's important that during the weekly cleaning reset we do this for sure, because it's basically an integral part to the space being clean. I don't think a space can be clean if it wasn't vacuumed. After vacuuming and mopping, we only have a couple of more things to do, so stick with me till we finish this. The next thing for me is changing the sheets of our bed, and my parents did not do this nearly as regularly like this. We would only clean the sheets every once in a while, but again, since living alone, I've noticed that it really makes me feel so clean, fresh and cozy when I do this. Basically just changing the sheets, and because we already wiped the bed frame, it's gonna be so fresh. And because we set the clothes laundry to also wash and hopefully also to dry in the meantime, we will have a clean and fresh set of sheets, and then also a clean and fresh set of pajamas. The only thing we now need is to also shower and just have everything be super clean and super fresh and super cozy. So this is exactly why I like to do this. I always try try to make sure that we change the bed sheets. And if we feel like it doesn't need to be done because maybe we were traveling for a couple of days and it just doesn't need to be done, sometimes what we do is just change the pillowcases. That sometimes makes quite a bit of difference, especially in summer when we are not maybe using the blankets, so it doesn't really matter as much, but just changing the pillowcases sometimes can make quite a bit of difference because that's where your head goes. So it does make quite a bit of difference in my opinion. But usually I like to change everything just because it feels nicer. Now I have a couple of things that I do specifically. One of them is put away the laundry that was drying in the meantime, which is clothes. In my case, I also like to iron the clothes one of the days on the weekend, usually on Sunday. But I have to be honest, I don't really like ironing the clothes. So to minimize me having to do that, usually there are two ways to basically go about this. In winter, I basically don't do it at all because all the sweaters don't need to be ironed at all, and anything else maybe needs to be ironed once in a while. And in the summer, usually I just iron the shirts. It only takes like 10 minutes or so. When I was living with my parents, we basically ironed on the as needed basis, which meant that we would iron that morning for that day, and I hated that. Maybe we would iron the night before, but I noticed that if I iron everything at once and then just put it on the hanger, it doesn't really make that much of a difference, especially because here we're talking about just t-shirts and stuff like that. I'm not talking about like dress shirts and stuff that wrinkles really easily. We're talking just like everyday stuff. And the second thing is, if you have a drying machine, I feel like if you put your clothes to dry immediately after washing them, and then also immediately as the machine finishes the drying, immediately take it out and lay it flat or immediately hang it on the hanger, you don't need to iron. Most of the things I feel like function this way. Sometimes you do still need to iron, but I feel like this is like a shortcut to ironing. And I like to do that if I can. But if not, and if one or two things need to be ironed, I just do it and put it on a hanger, and it's good for the entire week and even more. And I would rather do these things once, use like a 10 minutes of my time, and then just be done with it for the entire week. Next very important thing for me is to prepare my medication for the week, and this is because I take some medication, like a quarter of the whole tablet, and it's important to me that I have all the quarters ready, and I always put them in this like weekly pill organizer just because I know then which day I took it or not yet for that day. And at the very least for me is to cut the medication into quarters and put it in this organizer. But if I feel like I also need some vitamins for this week, I feel maybe something is lacking or I want to take something, I would also put those in the organizer as well. After that, we also have one more important thing that I try to do on the weekends, every single weekend, and that is input everything that we were spending throughout the week into my Excel spreadsheet. And because this doesn't really take that much time and it's not really part of the cleaning, it's more like a part of the reset, let's say, of the week, I sometimes do it on Friday because then I know for the weekend where we stand. Sometimes I even do it throughout the week in the evening, so it only takes a little bit of time to do. But it's important to me because then we can have discussions over the weekend where we're standing, what needs to be paid, what needs to be done, and just we cannot do that if I don't input the spending basically. And I don't like to use apps. Maybe I will try some, but for now I like my own spreadsheet that I have, and maybe I will share it on my Ko-Fi page. If you want to check, go and see if it's there. Maybe right now not, but maybe soon. But it's not really nothing special. It's just a normal Excel spreadsheet where I put all my spending and see how much money we have now and how much more we should and can spend in each category, and then we can have discussions of how we will go about them. I also really like to use the weekend to deal with all the papers that come in throughout the week. Usually there's just either some flyers or some mail that comes, and I have two ways of dealing with this. At the very least, I throw away everything that we don't need, usually the flyers, and then for everything that we want to keep, I either put it in their own folder where they should go, or if I feel lazy for that week and I actually really hate doing the papers, then I have this organizer where I just put it, and then whenever I feel like actually dealing with it, then I will move it to the folder. But when I'm actually looking for the paper, these are the only two places where I would look, and it's always in one of those two places. It's either super organized in the folders or it's just there waiting for me to be organized, but it's put away and it's in one of those two places. And I added dealing with paper because it just comes in so much during the week, and I feel like if you don't at least somehow deal with it during the weekend, it just gets out of control. So at the very least, what we do is throw away what we don't need, like the flyers, and then whatever we do need, put it somewhere where we know it's gonna be there. And that for me is enough for the weekly reset part. This one is particularly important to me during summer, and that is clean my shoes. And I put it up because in summer I usually wear these white sneakers and they get dirty all the time, but I don't have the time to clean it every single day. That's probably what my grandma would want for me, but I just cannot do it. So I made a compromise with myself to at least do it once a week, which is usually on Sunday, so that I have it clean for at least the beginning of next week. And this kind of helps, keeps me motivated to go to work because I have nice clean clothes and also I have clean shoes. And I don't know, it just makes me feel really good and I like to do it. And it actually doesn't really take that much time. Of course, if I really get them dirty during the week, I would clean them, but it doesn't really take that much time to just kind of keep up with it. And doing it once on the weekend, I feel like it's literally enough to just kind of wipe them. You don't have to wash them in the washer every time. You just like take a wet wipe and just clean it a little bit and it's completely fine. In the winter and when I'm not wearing white sneakers, I usually don't need to do this every single week. And if I feel like I need to do something, I just do it a little bit with some sort of microfiber towel, but usually it's just every once in who knows, because in the winter it just makes no sense to try to clean your shoes when it's constantly dirty. If it's black, it doesn't really matter that much in my opinion. So now that we've done all of this work and cleaning, we can actually do like the self-care part of this reset. And here what I like to do can vary every single week. At the very least, what I usually do is take a nice long warm shower and do everything that I usually don't get to do during the week when it comes to showering, such as maybe shaving if I feel like it, or maybe put like a hair mask or something that's just either I don't have the time for it during the week or I just don't feel like it. I just feel a bit lazy and don't like to do it. Usually on the weekend I feel more motivated to do stuff like this, so that's exactly when I do it. If I want, I also put the face mask on, I relax, put some relaxing music on, or just raindrops, do some bullet journaling, reflect about my week, plan for the next week, get everything nice and cozy. Just make sure that I take care of myself and it feels really nice and taken care of. Maybe I'll write something in my diary if I feel like it. If nothing happened, then I can skip that part, of course. I can skip any part that I don't really feel like doing that week. But sometimes I do all of this if I have the time and the motivation. And also sometimes I like to do my nails or stuff like that. Some of this I definitely do throughout the week whenever I feel like it. But I feel like Sunday evening, right before you start work, is a good time spot to do all of this and just kind of ground yourself and prepare yourself for what's coming in the next week. So when I look at my apartment after all of this, is everything clean? Probably not. Is everything decluttered? Is every project finished? Is everything in its place? No, it's not. This is not a cleaning where you need to get everything done. This is a cleaning reset that I created for myself so that I have most of the things that I feel like they really matter cleaned and put away. But then you have a clean house at the bare minimum. It's all taken care of and you're taken care of, and then you get to lay in your bed clean and nice, and the bed is clean and the house is clean and everything is nice and fresh and clean, and you're just listening to some relaxing music and just getting cozy and enjoying yourself. For my husband and I, when we are working together, most of the cleaning part of it, we can do it maybe like an hour or maybe hour and a half sometimes. So all of that we can do in 1.5 hours on the weekend, basically. If after this we still feel like something needs to be done and we have the time and energy, we will do it. It's not a problem. But take a look at this example. Let's say we were sick for the entire week and we're finally better. We want to get back our apartment to the baseline and it's not super dirty, like we did not do too many things, but we have tissue papers all over the place. We maybe have some dishes here and there because we were just sick and we did not deal with all of that. Okay, let's see what's the bare minimum that we need to do to get everything back to its place. But we were sick, so we maybe still don't have the energy that we usually have. So what's like the bare minimum that would make the difference but not really feel too overwhelming? So I feel like this is more or less that. If for some of these things we feel like we just cannot do them, that's also fine. Sometimes I feel worse and he feels better, so he does most of the things. Sometimes it's the other way around. Sometimes he's not here, so I do all of the things, like in this example. And then also we do even more than this. On top of all of this, we also have other cleaning routines, such as monthly or even every once in a while, and this is more based on how much I think we need to clean these particular things. For example, the fridge, the dishwasher, the oven. All these things need to be done, but they definitely don't need to be cleaned on a weekly basis, so they are not included in this. And we can talk about this some other time. For right now, this is all we do, and I feel like this is all we need to really get the place back to the baseline, which is exactly the goal of the weekly clean. So this is all we do and all I have to say on this topic. If you enjoyed this video, please consider leaving it a like or a comment to let me know. I'm usually also not the person who leaves comments on any videos. I'm usually not a commenter almost ever, but I make one exception, and that is to small channels, and luckily I'm also a small channel here. So if you also want to make this exception that I usually do, maybe you can leave a comment in this video. If you don't know what to write, maybe you can just say which thing you do every single week to kind of reset your space. And if you don't know that, or if you don't want to say that, maybe you can just leave a tomato emoji in my comments. Like, why not? It's an easy thing. If you don't like tomatoes, then I don't know, choose another one. Either way, if you found this video useful, I really would appreciate if you liked it, commented, and or subscribed, so it would boost for more people to see and help even more people. But if you didn't, then that's completely fine. You can just leave. I was really happy that you reached this point of the video, and maybe I will also see you in my next one. Bye bye!